Good afternoon. Just want to thank everybody for coming out on what I think is a historic moment here in the city of Newark. I just want to take the time to thank the Municipal Council first. See Councilwoman McGyver here from this ward. Want to thank them for their support of this historic ordinance here in the city of Newark. And we made it. We purposefully made it an ordinance because we could have done like most other cities and done an executive order and spent, and did what we wanted to do based on that. But I thought that was not really the democratic and, more stabilizing thing to do. I think that at the end of the day, the council should vote on it and make it a law so that it exists in perpetuity, and if you want to change it, then you have to change the law, not the person. Fortunately or unfortunately, I won't be the mayor forever, so people can change policy when I leave, but it is a little more difficult to change the law. So this ordinance does a few things. It is establishing what we're calling the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. People forget the trauma recovery part. And that is not new. So I want folks to know this is not something we thought of in the middle of COVID-19, in the middle of the other pandemic of George Floyd and racism and white supremacy. We have been talking about Newark as a trauma-informed city for some time now. We've been talking about violence as a public health issue since I was the councilman of the South Ward. This is not a new phenomenon to Newark. In fact, the Public Safety Department has been out of their budget hiring social workers before this. They have used their resources to create a Hope One van that goes out and supports folks that are addicted to drugs and that are homeless in our community before all of this. They've partnered with many groups, including the Newark Community Street Team, Newark Street Academy, Westward Violence Reduction Initiative, Brick City Peace Collective, and on and on and on, to establish a holistic kind of approach to violence and crime in the city, because they know that policing is a piece of a larger puzzle. It is an important and impactful piece, but it's certainly a piece in a larger puzzle to help us reduce violence and crime in our city. So this is not new. I think George Floyd and all of the protests and uprising throughout the country expedited what we were trying to make happen in a slow, monotonous kind of way. I think that the moment made us say that we need to do this now. So what is the ordinance? The ordinance, first, it immediately establishes a policy that forces city employees to intervene on racist and white supremacist acts. It also disciplines immediately, through separation of employment, city employees that commit racist acts, hate acts, immediately. We separate all opportunity to work in the city in any function at all, and anybody who watches it and does not report it or does not intervene will also be disciplined. We think this is important. We believe that racism and white supremacy should be illegal. We established a hate group registry and amended as new groups are identified. Here is the thing that has been causing many of the controversy, and I understand why to some degree, and in the other degree I don't. It says outlaw white supremacy and hate groups, declaring them as terrorists and ban them from the city. People believe that this is an attack on people's First Amendment rights. Well, we're not upset with the Klan and white supremacists because of what they say, because we can have a few choice words for them as well. We're upset with them because of what they've done. They have a history of terror. So if the United States State Department can declare Boko Haram, Intifada, Hamas, the PLO, if they can say that these are terrorist groups and that anything you do to support these groups is a criminal act because they believe that they're a threat to the state, we say that the Klan and white supremacist groups are a threat to us. And we're not saying that simply because we're angry at them because they don't like black people. There's a lot of people who don't like us. We are upset because recently people wearing that banner went into Mother Emanuel Church and killed people while they were in Sunday school. We're upset to them because they blew up 4 little girls in Alabama in Sunday school. Because they've lynched us for centuries, hung people from lampposts and trees, and burned down whole communities because people were prosperous. There is documented history of lynchings, of murder, from Emmett Till on, where the Klan and white supremacist organizations have organized themselves to commit terror in our community. They've burned crosses on our lawns. This is what they've done. And so we're not angry with them for what they say. We believe that they're terrorists, and we do not want terrorists of any sort who are organized to commit terror in our community. We're in front of the 1st precinct, which was the 4th precinct in 1967. And we're here because we're repurposing this facility to trauma care, violence prevention, workforce development, and we're creating a museum that chronicles local activism in Newark and the positive changes that have been made in our police and public safety department since then. We want to chronicle that so people can see the struggles that we went through and why we are doing this today. And lastly, the part of it that I think you guys are most interested in is that we are going to do all of this by repurposing some funds from the Department of Public Safety, 5% of their funds, to come and do this work that we have already been doing. And so now we're going to expand that work. We're going to grow that work. And so activity, for example, that the Newark Community Street team has to do in the South Ward can be done throughout the city. The social workers that are assigned to Newark Police Department can work here and work shifts that are important for us. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, if people have an issue, they don't have to call the police. They can call the social worker to come out. Particularly if they have issues around mental health, the child that is incorrigible, drunken individual, homeless person. Because a social worker probably can deal with those issues a lot better than a person with a gun. And we believe that. And the great thing about it, I think that we have a progressive public safety department. I think that our public safety director is progressive in a sense that our chief. They believe that these are things that we need to do. As a matter of fact, I think we are at a point in Newark now where we understand that our whole safety depends on our relationship with one another. And if our relationships are strained, so is our strategy to reduce violence and crime in our city. All over the place, people are saying we're going to move money from police departments and do different things. And I had a talk with a few people trying to just brainstorm about what this should be. And I said, the city of Newark is not the anti-poverty program. We don't have those resources. We don't have the resources of HUD. All the things that really need to happen in these cities around the country need federal engagement and involvement. But what we can do is immediately affect the violence and crime and the issues that are related to violence and crime, and begin to help people in this community with trauma, begin to help people in the community find housing, begin to help people in the community get employment, find ways to get jobs, get through difficult and troubling situations, help their children whose parents have been arrested not repeat a cycle of crime and violence, intervene in retaliation that takes place in this community, deal with conflict resolution, treat people who have been victimized by several layers of trauma for decades of their life, generations in their family, of no fault of their own, simply because they were born in a zip code where trauma has been more elevated. And Rutgers have done a study for us and told us that 80% of the areas in the city do not experience violent crime at all. And it sounds like a good thing, but on the flip side of that, it means that 20% of the city experiences 100% of the violence and crime. And if you go to those parts of the city, you'll see why. The levels of unemployment, the levels of educational attainment, the poverty that exists in this community, the hardships and the difficulties that exist there. And so we want to intervene in those things. And that's what the Office of Violence and Trauma is going to do. And before I answer any questions, I want to give Larry Ham and Junius Williams the opportunity to talk. And I want to call, when we get to the questions, call the Public Safety Director up as well to help answer questions or speak. But I want to give them an opportunity because this building is history for them. They understand the necessity of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's important. If my father was alive, I would have him down here. But I'm sure these two gentlemen can take care of the job. So I'd like to call Brother Larry Ham up first.
Good afternoon. Let me thank Mayor Baraka for inviting me up to say a few words. Thank you very much, Mayor Baraka, for inviting me to this press conference. And let me say straightforwardly that I support Mayor Baraka's efforts and his ordinance to reallocate funds for social development, for the housing here of social programs at this precinct, for the museum that I understand Mr. Williams is going to be very much involved with. I'm very glad to be here to express my support for that. I am here in my old neighborhood. Many people don't know that this is where I grew up. I lived at number 5 Ridgewood Avenue on the corner of Ridgewood and Avon, next to the Ridgewood Bar and across the street from Esther's Restaurant. I can remember when these lovely homes here were not here. This precinct was surrounded by Hayes Homes, and across the street was Stella Wright and Scudder Homes. But Stella was right here. But Raz's father, Amiri Baraka, had a headquarters right here at 13 Belmont Avenue. It was called the Hikalu Mwalimu. That means house of the teacher. And it was actually there that his father married me and my wife, my first wife, that is, in 1974. In July of 1974, we were married by his father. So this community has a lot of history for me. Believe it or not, there was a movie theater right down the street. The National Theater was here. But as you can see, this community is moving in the right direction in terms of its development. It is not the community that it was in 1967 when people were protesting here, right here on this sidewalk, against police brutality. So I'm very much in support of what the mayor is doing, his ordinance on outlawing white supremacy and acts of racism and terrorism. I don't know how many people caught it in the newspaper, but last month, the Department of Homeland Security for the state of New Jersey declared that white supremacist organizations were the greatest threat to the safety and security of citizens here in the state of New Jersey. Just a couple of years ago, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, came out with a report that said white supremacist organizations had infiltrated all levels of law enforcement in the United States. And just yesterday, the Justice Department charged a service person, someone in the, I believe it was the Army, with passing that this person was an embedded member. What that means is that he was assigned to join the military and embed himself in a military unit. The Justice Department identified that person as a, quote, member of a satanic, this was the word, not my word, a satanic Nazi cult, that he was part of that, and he was passing information along to this faction so that they could launch a violent attack on our military. So this is a very serious problem. People don't know how serious it is, but I'm just glad that Mayor Baraka is right on top of it and doing what needs to be done. And it's just amazing. You see the transformative power of politics when it is in the service of the people. That this police precinct, which was the epicenter, the spark of the 1967 rebellion, is now being transformed into an institution that will meet people's social needs. It's just an amazing thing. I think the mayor deserves another round of applause for his foresight on this. So I just want to say thank you, Mayor. You have my personal support on this, and if there's anything I can do to help facilitate the plans that you have, anything I can do to assist Junius Williams and everybody else that's involved with that. I see the street team and everybody else here. Anything I can do to help y'all, just call on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for having me here. Larry Ham, always good to hear you. This is indeed an honor and a representation of the kind of change that Newark needs. Just to continue our trip down memory lane, it was right over here. If you can just picture this street here, it was full of stores turning that corner. As Larry told you, this was Hayes Homes, about 18 stories, probably about 600 or 700 families living there. Then you had Stella Wright over there, and it was a hot July evening. There were no air conditioners in these apartments, so everybody was out in the street, as they usually were, as you would be too if you were hot and on a July evening. And it was there that the police from this precinct first began beating the cab driver, John Smith. It was at that point that the people said, well, what are you doing? Why? And as they dragged him at some portion of this byway here into the station, it is my understanding that he was beaten some more, and the people thought he was dead, but he wasn't. So that's when the community of advocates started coming forth. Right here, there was a car with the head of CORE, Bob Kervin, standing, asking the people, please calm down. We're going to march down to City Hall. Now, Bob Kervin was no ordinary guy. He was a PhD at that time, or on his way to get a PhD, and was a former Marine. So if you see that picture of a man standing here looking like he was in shape, he was in shape. And he had a lot of respect in the community. But the crowd that had gathered around this doorway here at that time did not want to hear nonviolent action. So somebody read about over in there, or maybe it was right over in there. I wasn't here, but that's what the people tell me. They threw a Molotov cocktail at the building. Flames went up on the side of the wall, and that's when it began, the rebellion of 1967. You see a sign up here that was put up there, began a civil disturbance. Well, that kind of downplays it when 26 people get killed. It was more than a civil disturbance. As a matter of fact, it could have been less than what it was, but the governor called in the state police, and the governor called in the National Guard, and it had all about been put out, and that's when the combined forces of police, local, state, and national, began on a rampage, and 26 people were killed, all by the police officers, combined police officers in this operation. There were no guns ever found. People say, well, there were snipers. Well, no police, no gun shells, no police ever found any evidence that anybody had a gun that was used against the police. So I just wanted to give you that history because it's worth having. And I want to thank the mayor and the city council for passing this ordinance, making it a law that this building will be forever known for what will not happen here again. We will not have war on the people. We will have instead a combined operation, including the police, to prevent crime, to prevent violence, to prevent disturbances before they ever began. I'm happy that it's going to be a museum, but I'm happy also that there are going to be a lot of dynamic programs coming out of the museum. The record will show that just plain museums don't get to the people, so the museums have to come to the people. You can't expect people to come inside the building and take a look at all the artifacts of that. There is something that will be placed here that I'm very happy to have been a part of, the organizer for, and that's called riseupnewark.com. If you haven't seen that, over 1 million people have, and it documents the history of the empowerment process that black folks have gone through ever since Newark began. It's a useful tool for all of you who haven't looked at it. It will certainly be on display. People can push the button and see what it is. It's been reduced to a curriculum. Well, I shouldn't say reduced. It's been expanded to a curriculum that's used in the school district, which is good. But more importantly, this organization, this will be the starting point of street teams, if you will, small s, small t, going out into the community to bring people here, but also to listen. Also to bring some skills, to bring some skilled people to take care of people who are in need. The mayor said it. With the money that's coming forth, that the mayor and council have been made available, are planning on making available, it can't solve all the problems in Newark, problems of racism and poverty. But what it can do is to do what it can do, which is to bring people who care, people who are skillful, people who understand, people who say, well, this building now is a symbol of what used to be. Let us now join together and make Newark a symbol of what can be in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. You want to come up? to say something before you say something.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to, again, praise Mayor Baraka and the council. I think that this can be a model across the country in policing, 21st century policing. I think that police officers are short part-time problem solvers, and this makes it a full-time problem solver. I think social intervention before a crime is committed is important. I think when the mayor talks about homeless and talks about addiction and talks about domestic violence, police will always be needed. Police will always help. But we do our job and we move on. People keep offending, re-offending, okay? So I think it's important that the social intervention is important. And this is something that the mayor spoke about that we've been doing. When I came back on board with the mayor in 2015, he has asked us to hire for every 25 cops a social worker. That's in writing, documented, okay? And I have to say that in this plan, police will always be there. It's absurd to say that word, abolish, defund. I think Larry used the appropriate word, and I think it's diverting monies for social intervention. And I think it can only make police officers spend more time making the neighborhood safer. And I'm sure if you asked the 6,700 crime victims last year what they thought, they would think the same. And if you talk about where we were and where we're at, in 1967, I was 9 years old. I read about it in the newspaper. Let's fast forward it years later on May 30th in front of this place. The people that lived across the street and the people from this neighborhood stood side by side with the police. So people that didn't look like the people from Newark didn't get in that place. We don't know if Antiva was here. Very well, they could have been here. So I think that the social intervention using the Newark Street Team, using Hope One, bringing everything together under one roof, we can make less victims and less criminals, and it'll help. So I support the mayor and what he's doing. The chief of police, Darnell Henry, supports it and works very closely with me with this. So over the next phases, and I'm happy to hear that this precinct is being closed down and made into something that's going to be the communities, because no good things ever happen here. And it shouldn't be a site that we want to remember in 1967 when I was a young kid and when I was in charge of public safety on May 30th, 2020, as the mayor knows. So I support it, we support it, we're going to make it work, and I know it could work, and we could be a model. People will be coming here to see what we're doing. Thank you.
I will, any questions that people have, please? Yes, sir. Oh, go ahead. No, you take care of it. You could, Sandra, you could pick, you know.
About calls coming in the middle of the night. Who's going to determine when a social worker is sent to the scene? And is this going to be a co-responder environment, or will they be sent alone?
Well, I think the police department has already put out when we first started this, general orders describing the roles and responsibility of these folks. And obviously, if people need help, the police will be there to help them. The point is, for example, there was an instance in the city of Newark where the police responded to a situation where people said a person was mentally ill. By the grace of God, the police went to that situation and it got violent. The police officer was actually stabbed by this person, and they called and got an ambulance to come and get the person and not bring him to a precinct, but brought him to a hospital. I believe if a social worker was present at that scene, that it may not have escalated to that level. And so it's important that they are dispatched, and the police are dispatched when they're needed, but the social workers will be dispatched. And I think that the police department and collectively this office will make a decision. There will be an officer assigned to this building as well. So these people are not working on their own. We are working in concert with the police department and not apart from the police department.
So I just wanted to clarify apply to? I know we spoke about this last time, a few weeks ago, but the no layoffs are going to take place as a result of this. I mean, what are the reductions going to hit? Is it going to be equipment or what specifically?
So, yes, no current layoffs are in place for this. I think that we talk about attrition. When a police officer retires, the rate that he goes out with, we could hire 2.5 police officers. So maybe a police officer that money will be allocated to the violence office. Maybe 1.5 will, but we will not interfere with the staffing levels. You have to also think about this, that once this gets going, 25% of our calls for service are for social intervention. So when this is up and running over phases, it's going to be less calls for service from the police. We can concentrate more, like I said, on making it safer and reducing fear. So I would say attrition, using some of the attrition for this, plus hiring.
Hi. Is there any idea what staffing will look like at this new Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery? And will they be city employees that are relocated from other areas? Because I know there's furloughs.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yep.
And where will the police officers at this location be? Kind of redeployed. Is there any plans for that?
Yep. We're contemplating what that's going to look like now in terms of moving the police department or the folks here. I really don't think that that's a heavy issue, a lift for us. We've moved departments. We've opened up new departments. We've done all kinds of things in a matter of weeks, months here in the city of Newark. So I don't see that being a problem. And I know there is an immediate inclination to focus on a disruption of the police department. And we should begin to turn that into the inclination to think about how the community is going to benefit from this thing immediately. And that kind of disconnect is what causes what we're seeing all over the country, right? That we're overly concerned about what is happening to the police as opposed to what's happening to the people,
Mr. Mayor, as a legislative measure, can you speak to if there are any precedents for this type of action and how the city is viewing this as a model for other cities moving forward?
Well, there's no precedent here, definitely not in the state of New Jersey anywhere. Around the country, there are people who are obviously allocating dollars, at least promising to, and their mayors and governors are saying they're going to do this all over the country through executive order. But there is no law that's been established that puts it in place in perpetuity. And I think that we are the first. I haven't heard of anybody else who's doing that. And because the first thing I thought of about our good friend over across the water is, one, the enormity of the budget that they have, that they have more police officers than we have employees in the entire city of Newark, 10 times more than the employees that we have, but also that he's leaving. And so he can make a proclamation or a pronouncement, and 2 years later, it'll go away. So that's the first thing I thought of and said, we cannot do that. We have to make something that's long-standing. Yeah, what last one here? You.
Once the new department starts up, how are you guys going to track your success? How are you going to track the impact that it makes on the community?
That's a great question. Even now, the work that these folks are doing, we have IRB set up. We work with Rutgers. We work with other institutions that track the success of, for example, Westward Violence Reduction Initiative, what happens there. Street team work, Newark Street Academy, the impact that they're having and the programs that they do. We track that information now. We have that information. And they work very, very, very closely with the police department, by the way. And so this is not a separate thing. This is something that's happening already. The difference is a lot of the work that they do is garnered, the support that they get is garnered from grants. state grants, federal grants, different things, and then the city tries to supplement as much as we can. And so we want to make sure that these organizations continue to work with us over the long period of time. And so we think we should make sure we bring money to the table so that we can ensure the life of these organizations and the work that they do, because the work that they do is monumental. And I would challenge you to speak to any of the brass in our police department who work with these organizations and ask them the validity, the impact that these organizations have on the work that they do in these communities. I'm very confident that you would get positive responses from the brass who work with these organizations in the police department. I said he the last one, but you don't listen, so go ahead. No, this is a headquarters. I mean, they all can't be based here, obviously. We have Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center. We have all kind of things that are happening in the city now. This puts everything under one office, one roof. Obviously, these people are going to be all over the place working, right? Some on Clinton Avenue, hopefully some in the West Ward, some in the North Ward where we need them. We're gonna use folks as social workers are used out in the field, and that's important. People here are going to manage that process. The Newark Community Street Team will work out of here, but by the grace of God, they won't be in here all day, right? They work in the field. They do safe passage way to school. They do conflict resolution out in the field for the most part, right? Not in this building. But this will be the headquarters of all of that activity that the city has been doing in a disparate way to bring it together under one office so we could do it in a more cohesive and coherent way where there's direction to all of the programs that we do. And if you go to the Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center, you'll see the incredible programs that they have there right now. Incredible programs that they're fighting to get funding for. Incredible programs for women who are victimized by domestic violence, trying to get them jobs, trying to get them training. Actually helping women separate themselves physically from relationships, sort of like an underground railroad, separate, and I've seen that, separate themselves from people so they're not abused. And so they do need resources. They need resources for transportation. They need resources for housing. They need resources for help. And I think it's only right that the resources that we use for the police department are used in a holistic way, because ultimately, if we can get a woman away from a violent situation, then the police don't have to show up for a homicide. Well, we're not sure about that yet. We're not sure about that yet. But we did pass a policy for every 25 cops, we hire one social worker. But we'll revisit all of those things once we organize this office in such a way. We've already started the conversations. Public safety has given us suggestions. We got suggestions from community organizations as well. We're going to put this thing together. It is going to function in a way that'll be a model for the rest of the state of New Jersey and prayerfully for the entire country. So I look forward to it. I thank all of you guys and ladies for coming out and being a part of this. I would like to sign this thing and get out of here. Thank you.